Broadcasting live from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review is proud to showcase Timextender in the Solution Spotlight, an exclusive webinar event.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring Timextender and a deep dive into their data estate software. For us, the Spotlight is of particular interest as we've been seeing the proliferation of business applications and the data they produce increasing more rapidly than ever. So the simple challenge is, how can the typical business get the insight they need from data when it is growing faster than they can manage? The only solution is to automate the mundane, time-consuming tasks typically involved with data management. And today, we'll be digging into how Timextender can help you build a modern data estate that eliminates tedious data preparation tasks, generates code and documentation automatically, and frees up your time for higher impact analytics projects. Joining us to show you how all of this is possible is Joseph Treadwell, Head of Solution Specialists at Timextender. Joseph, welcome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Doug. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, as I mentioned, we're excited to have you here. This is something that certainly our audience is incredibly interested in and is faced with this challenge every day. So before we dive into that, and just to set everybody's expectations, I'm going to take a step back and let Joseph really kind of go through the whole overview of Timextender and then really dig into a demonstration for roughly about 40 minutes or so, and then we're going to come back and do some Q&A and take questions from our audience, and I'll have some questions. And so with that in mind, before we get going, your background at Timextender has really been quite extensive, almost 7 years now. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen. I know you've been dealing with a lot of prospects throughout your career, a lot of clients. What are you seeing as kind of the macro trend, in addition to obviously the overwhelming flood of data that's coming into these organizations?
Yeah, that is really interesting, Doug. Yeah, so I have been with Timextender for about 7 years. I've been doing this. Prior to Timextender, I worked at a small manufacturing facility, and they really struggled with data. And I spent days, hours, and hours, and what turned into years helping them manage their data and struggling with that. So I dealt with a lot of these pains. And then I found out about Timextender and decided to join on. And I've been helping people manage their data ever since. But some of the things that we have been seeing is this dramatic increase in the amount of data, especially since COVID. The remote applications that we're all using, we were relying so much more on being remote, working from home. And so that created just an influx of a lot more data and a lot more applications. And the challenges that we're seeing now in the market is, how can organizations continue to use the same methodology that they've been using, even though the amount of data that's coming at them is increasing so dramatically?
Well, one of the things that got us excited about doing this event with you is this new perspective that you're bringing to the table, and really a new framework for thinking about things, and really some powerful tools, I think. And so rather than me continuing to talk about it, I'd love for you to start to show the audience what Timextender's developed and how they can leverage that to handle the challenges that they're facing. So I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to hand you the ball, and I'll be popping in periodically for maybe a question or two, but otherwise the floor is yours.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Doug. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump right into it. So first and foremost, I like to really set the scene. We talked a little bit about these changes that we're seeing, but I think it's important to talk about what is driving a lot of these changes. And that's something that's being referred to as the machine economy. You can Google it, you can look it up if that's a new term for you, but it's a term that's describing the next phase of economics. Essentially a phase of economics that's driven by AI, machine learning, and smart automation. These different areas of data are going to drive about 70% of GDP over the next few years. So we know that because of these different areas, data is increasing already and will continue to increase very, very rapidly. And the challenge with this is, of course, how can modern companies keep up? We have many different methods of approaching data. So let's take a look at what those methods are and how we might be able to tackle this challenge. So one thing that the industry is in pretty much unanimous agreement on is the framework in managing the data. And that's being referred to as a data estate. And this is a modern infrastructure that allows organizations to collect and manage their data in a way that allows for modern analytics to happen across the organization in all of its different fashions. First of all, the data lake is a way to ingest the data, bring that into a central landing area. And the nice thing about that technology is it's highly scalable, and it doesn't really matter what format the data is in to bring that in and land it. It's very powerful for data scientists doing machine learning and things like that. And the second area is what we call the data warehouse. And this, of course, is typically done on a relational database. This is really what allows for analytics to be done, aggregating data across the entire organization. But the challenges come in how to really connect and consolidate this data when you have so many different data sources. You need to create a single version of truth. We have more and more data sources coming in. So how do you bring those together in a way that's effective and efficient? And then there's the third layer, which is what's known as essentially the data marts, right? We have this large data warehouse, essentially covering every aspect of our organization, but we have different groups of users, right? We have the purchasing department, we have the finance department, the marketing department. They, of course, are going to need access to different portions of this data. They don't want to have to scan through the entire data warehouse to find what data they need. They would rather just have access to the data that's relevant to them. And that's really where the data marts come into play, being able to create a collection of data that is relevant to a specific group of users or for a specific purpose. So again, this framework is used, regardless of the vendor, regardless of organization size. Now, the challenge here is if you are a smaller organization, building all of these different components can be very challenging, very expensive. Now, we know that having these different components is definitely the best way to organize your data. The question is, how can you get to that point if you have all of these challenges? And of course, there's other things as well in the industry that are making this more difficult, other obstacles. Of course, there's regulatory compliance. How are you going to build and maintain all of this data when you have all of these regulations kind of controlling and defining how you can manipulate your data? Plus, of course, you have to document every aspect of it. If you've ever heard of GDPR, HIPAA, or Sarbanes-Oxley, you know that documenting this entire data estate is really going to be essential if you're going to be abiding by these different regulations. And then, of course, you have your large teams. You have to constantly reskill them, ensure that they have the resources that they need. You have burnout. You have data quality and security issues. So a lot of these obstacles surround building and maintaining a framework and a solution like this. So let's look at a couple of the different approaches that are out there currently to build and maintain these data estates. First and foremost, we have the approach that most of you are likely most familiar with, and we refer to this as the stack. It's this essentially manually coding a patchwork of different tools. You can look at things like using SQL Server Management Studio, creating stored procedures. You might be using Databricks and creating pipelines in there. But typically you have a lot of different tools, a lot of different coding languages. And of course, piecing all of these different things together can require really an army of developers, right? Because learning Scala and Spark takes an entire career's worth of experience to be able to do well. And then writing really good stored procedures in SQL, that's another career's worth of experience. So you have to have all of these different skill sets to manage these different forms of data storage. Of course, you also, because they're hand coded, you have the aspect of human error in there, and you always end up with typically very fragile pipelines. So you build these data pipelines, you spend a lot of time doing so, and then they can break down very easily. Another challenge is you're bringing data together, right? You have specific rules that are related specifically to your business, right? How your ERP system connects to your CRM system, for example, or your warehouse management system. How these systems come together and are related to one another is what we refer to as business logic. Now, if you're hand coding everything, you're actually taking that business logic, translating it directly into code, and that code is typically embedded in a specific platform or technology. For example, if you're writing it in Spark, you're going to be kind of stuck with a Spark engine. If you're writing it in SQL, you're going to be stuck with a SQL engine. And then there's, of course, types of writing different technologies. So you're going to be kind of locked in to that specific technology that you might be using when you develop that. You're also going to deal with the extremely high costs of personnel and all of these various tools that you're going to be maintaining and stitching together. So with these issues that I've identified right here, the industry has come up with an option. And you'll see a lot of these around these different platforms that are available. But there are many challenges. So while they do address many of the challenges from the stack, the platforms often go too far in the other direction. Oftentimes they're a little bit too restrictive. Sometimes these platforms can be made up of loosely coupled tool sets where they say they're a single platform, but they're really different technologies kind of loosely stitched together. Oftentimes big teams are still required. They can be poorly integrated. And another challenge is, especially when you're talking about data compliance, is sometimes you can lack data ownership in this. You're not really sure what transformations are being done, in what way, who owns the data when this data is being computed in this specific platform, what's happening with that data at that point in time. It can be very difficult to look under the covers and see what's actually happening, and really be able to manage and control your data to the degree that you want. Now, of course, there is another option, and this option is what we call the builder option. It's a low-code, agile, and integrated approach to data management. It requires small and efficient teams. It's typically very easy to use, user-friendly, which means that when new people come on the team, they can learn the platform quickly, manage the solution quickly. It's also visual. So you can see the solution instead of having to translate code to understand business logic. You can see everything in a visual interface. Typically requires 70 to 80% reduced implementation costs versus these other approaches. So what is a builder really? I love using the analogy of comparing this to the web development space. So if you've paid at all attention to the web development space over the last 20, 30 years, you may have noticed that, well, in the 1990s and the 2000s, just about everybody was hand coding their websites, right? If you were a company and you needed a website, you needed to build and design this website, you hired some developers and they wrote code, HTML code, CSS code. They put all of this together and they were able to build a website using that code. Now, of course, many of the challenges that we talked about with the stack also were involved here. It was a slow process. It was very expensive. And when we realized that just about every single company is going to need a website, we realized very quickly that, well, not every company is going to be able to hire a full team, train a full team of developers, or build their own website by themselves. We need a better solution. We need something else. And that's where we're seeing 95% of websites today not being built by hand, not being hand coded, but instead being built in a website builder platform. There are many examples of this, things like Shopify, Squarespace, and GoDaddy. All of these platforms now, you can log in, you can design a website using a nice visual drag and drop interface. What you see is what you get, and you design that website, and then all the code is generated for you. All the HTML, the CSS code gets generated and is applied. You typically can still see that code. If you open up the covers, you can still see and make your modifications that you need to. So it's not obscured in that way, not necessarily a black box. But this allows for extremely fast development, a visual interface that you can easily understand. It also dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for organizations to be able to build their own websites. And now with these solutions that are available, companies and startups can start their organization and have a website within a week's time rather than taking about a year to develop. And so we're seeing that, again, about 95% of all websites today are generated by a platform. That is a very significant difference, going from everything being hand-coded to 95% of all websites today being hand-coded. And the question that we ask ourselves is, why is it that the analytics industry hasn't come around to understanding this concept yet? Well, that's where Timextender comes in. Timextender is a modern data estate builder for analytics. It uses a drag and drop interface to allow you to design your modern data estate, connect to any data sources that you need to define which data, how often you want to bring that in, and then consolidate that data and bring it out, make it available for your users. The Timextender platform is built in 3 distinct layers, very similar to the data estate framework that we talked about earlier. The operational data exchange is the first part of these different layers or areas. And this is the area of Timextender that allows you to build and design your operational data exchange. Start ingesting data from over 250 different data sources, bring that data in quickly and land it in a single consolidated, scalable, but inexpensive data storage platform. The incredible thing about Timextender is very similar to these website builders. It's not necessarily the website itself. Timextender is an abstraction layer. So it's not storing the data. You select which data platform you want to store that data in, and Timextender simply generates the code to ingest and land that data in that underlying platform. The next area is what we call the modern data warehouse. And this is what allows you to, again, take these disparate different data sources and consolidate them. Define your business logic, your different data transformations, bring that data together to create a single version of truth across the entire organization. I've helped many customers build their data warehouses and find great insights in that. One of our customers, you might have heard of them, the jewelry company Pandora. They had over 20 different ERP systems around the world. They're a large global company. And so they have these different ERP systems. They needed a way to analyze data across all of these different ERP systems and create that single version of truth. They were able to do that with Timextender and do it very quickly. The next layer is what we call the semantic models. And this is essentially where you design these data marts, these relevant data areas that can be pushed out to different groups of business users. In Timextender, we actually call these the shared semantic layer. And that means that you can take these, build these models and push these out to whichever desired analysis tool that you might be using, whether that's analysis services, or Power BI, Tableau, or ClickSense. You can define these data models and push that model directly out to an analysis tool for quick analysis. So you might be wondering, okay, who is Timextender? How come we haven't quite heard of you yet? Well, we've been around for a little while, but before we get into that, I want to talk about some of the important aspects that we're doing here in the solution that really differentiate the platform. So across these three different layers, we're actually leveraging metadata on every single aspect of the technology. So when we talk about being a fully integrated solution, it is in these three distinct layers, yes, but it is a fully integrated solution because we're using this metadata all the way across. And that allows the platform to provide documentation, data lineage, and also intelligent execution that's taking into account dependencies and efficiencies, and actually learning from itself over time to maintain and get faster and faster and ensure that your users get their data as quickly as possible. So what does that mean for different teams in an organization if you're using something like Timextender? Well, number one, IT and data teams are going to be able to develop and maintain their solution 10 times faster than traditional methods. And that's pretty much across the board what we see with our customers. And our customers agree that when using Timextender, it's really significantly faster than they were ever able to do before. Also, business users are going to benefit from 70 to 80% reduced build costs. Not only build costs, but maintenance. Because of that metadata that's maintained, the maintenance of these solutions, they will just continue to run over time and require dramatically less maintenance. There's also the BI and analytics departments. They're going to be benefiting from a code-free experience where they can drag and drop and build their solutions, which means they'll be able to focus on bigger, better projects and finally get over that backlog of business requests. So again, Timextender, we have been around for some time. We've been building solutions. We have over 3,500 customers around the globe. You can see some of them here. You can scan the code if you want to visit our website and see what other customers that we have and case studies. An important thing to know, and one of the things that I love about working with Timextender is that when customers sign up with Timextender, they almost never leave. The second customer we had back in 2006 is still a customer of ours today. We are a global company. We have over 170 different partners across 95 different countries. And I like to talk a little bit about some of these projects that I have worked on, because I have worked myself on some of the ones that you're seeing on screen. For example, the one in Puerto Rico was quite an impressive project. We were able to look at the customer's data, analyze their GIS data or their geographic data for the entire area of Puerto Rico, identify every property on the map, and tie that to an amount that had not been billed for property tax yet. So we were able to do all of this in Timextender in 2 days. We were able to visualize that in Power BI and have every property laid out there in just about 2 days. And that, to me, that was really an incredible feat, being able to do that in such a short period of time. But it really emphasizes and illustrates the power and speed of Timextender. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard enough by now. You're ready to see the platform. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm going to start, as I always do, where we all start, right? Doing some analysis of our data. So we're looking at our data and we're trying to understand, we're trying to, gain insights. But of course, like we talked about, our data is growing. We always have new data coming at us all the time. So this organization is analyzing their purchase amounts over the last few years. Of course, they're growing and they have new data coming at them as well. Now they have a new facility that they just opened up in Europe. And so they have a new ERP system. They have new data. They want to integrate that data into their dashboards. And of course, they need this right now. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to integrate all of this new data into the dashboards as quickly as possible? In addition to that, since they have a new facility in Europe, they also have some executives in Europe as well. And they want to see these dashboards, not just in USD, but also in euros. So we're going to do some currency conversion as well and convert this from USD into euros. So we have some complex data transformation that we need to do. We need to bring in some new data sets. Let's see how we can do that all in just a few minutes to help ease our data pains here for our organization. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Timextender. Here in Timextender, you can see, first of all, on the left-hand side, the Solution Explorer. And what you're seeing here is a few of those different layers that we talked about earlier in the application. We have, first and foremost, the operational data exchange. This right now, my ODX is connected to an Azure data lake. Now, the important thing to understand about Timextender being an abstraction layer, we can regenerate that code based on your desired platform. So if you are more of an on-prem organization and you have your servers running on-prem, you can deploy this as a fully on-prem solution. No need to go to the cloud now. But when you are ready to go to the cloud, Timextender will automatically regenerate that code for the desired cloud applications and cloud solutions. So you don't need to rebuild your projects when you're ready and you need to scale to that next level. So the ODX, or the operational data exchange, is here. The modern data warehouse, like we talked about, is laid out right here. And then that's the semantic layer, the shared semantic layer we talk about. I have 4 different models built up in my project right now: sales, purchasing, finance, and marketing. We're going to be taking a look at this purchasing model here, and that's what's feeding that Power BI dashboard that we just looked at earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with the operational data exchange. We'll start by ingesting some new data. Now, as I mentioned, you can see here I'm connected to an Azure data lake, and I have a number of different data sources that I'm already connected to. Now, these data sources are maintaining connections to these different systems, whether that's an ERP system, maybe they're simply Excel files, maybe they're other cloud solutions. But the ODX is constantly orchestrating this data, ensuring new and fresh data is being brought in. But we need to bring in new data. As I mentioned, we want to convert our currencies from USD into euros. Now, to do that, we need to get access to some exchange rates. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to a new data source, and we'll call this exchange rates. Now, as I mentioned before, Timextender does support over 250 different data sources. Now, you can scan through that list of different data sources that you see here, and you can simply search and filter them to find out what data is relevant for you. In addition, we also support any third-party provider installed on the system. So that means that just about any data you want to connect to, you can do so quickly and easily. I'm going to type in here exchange rates, and let's see what we have available. So we have this exchange rates 2021 data source. I am going to go ahead and use that one. And here, what I need to do, I do have a an account created on this service. This connects to a service called openexchangerates.org. You can create an account and they provide you with an app ID. So this is essentially a REST API. If you're familiar with REST APIs, very similar process. You create an account, they provide you with access, they give you some keys. We paste those keys right in here, and then we see if we can get connected to that data source. All right, so I'm successfully connected now. We can click next. I can go through and see which endpoints this provider is allowing me to look at. Open exchange rates looks like there's a few different endpoints. One of the really incredible things about the ODX is the ability to preview the data and write SQL queries against that data without ever even moving it. So right now, again, I'm using a REST API to connect to a web service. I put in that app ID, and now I'm able to write a SQL statement against that REST API that allows me to start exploring and discovering the data before I even have to bring it in. So this is going to allow me to verify that this is the right data I in fact want to connect to. We can see here we have currencies, the value of those currency or the exchange rate, and then what it's being compared to. So in this case, these are all being compared to the USD. Great. So we'll go ahead and close that up. I'm going to bring in these three tables, include them in my table selection, and then next I'll add a transfer task because we want to bring that data over. I'll simply call this transfer for now, and we can decide how often we want to refresh that data. Exchange rates are typically updated on a daily basis. So I'm going to set this to run every day at 3 a.m. We'll pick the days of the week, and we'll go ahead and hit OK. So now what I have is a connection to that data source with recurring data being refreshed and brought into my data lake on a daily basis, all within just a few minutes. So now we're transferring that data from that REST API over into our data lake for us. And this will be scheduled and will continue to run every night. Now, while that data is being pulled in, let's go ahead and take a look at our modern data warehouse. I'll open that in a new tab. We can see that open right here. And I'll expand this and we see a number of different tables that I have available already in my data warehouse. We have a customer dimension, people dimension, products, sales orders, sales transactions, and purchase transactions. So this is the table we were looking at earlier, the core table, fact table that's feeding that Power BI dashboard that we took a look at. So in here, we can see our order amounts that are in USD. Again, what we want to do is we want to convert this, which is a simple calculation, into the amount in euros as well. So let's go ahead and clone this field, and we're going to call this order amount euro. All right, so now I have order amount in USD, order amount in euro. Of course, this isn't yet translated into the euros. We need to multiply this by that conversion rate that we just brought in from our exchange rates data source. Now, the question is, this is a relational database here in my data warehouse. However, this is a data lake. So how are we going to bring the data from our data lake into our relational database in a way that's consistent, easy to deploy, and allows me to make changes and updates very quickly? Well, let's take a look at how we do that in Timextender. So I'll double click the ODX. This new data selection tab opens right here. We can see, again, this is my management, how I'm adding data sources. And then I can select data from my ODX using this tab. So here I have the exchange rates data source that I just added. I can search through my catalog of data. Again, these are files in a data lake, but I can simply now drag and drop these files directly onto my relational database data warehouse. And just using that drag and drop, Timextender was able to define the exact table structure, data types, primary keys, relations, anything that was identified in that data source. That metadata gets brought over and applied directly. So Timextender is now going to generate that code for me automatically to create that table in the relational database. It takes something that's very complex, bringing data from a data lake, a file format, into a relational database table format, and it makes it into a simple drag and drop procedure. Here I have the latest table, and again, we have that value. If we remember from looking at the data earlier, this value is my exchange rate, okay? So I wanna bring this value and I wanna use it in this calculation. So I'm gonna drag and drop this, again, using that drag and drop approach to define table relationships, table transformations, dramatically speeding up this process. My join column here is going to be currencies equal to a fixed value. Of course, remember, we want to translate this into the euro. So we'll click OK. So now the value of the euro, or the exchange rate from euro to USD, is now going to be applied right in this field here. So what I can do is now edit this transformation. We'll go in here and we can multiply this by that value field. Now, one important thing here is I am writing, I can simply drag and drop the field in, or I can type the name of that field. But if you notice, when I drag that field in right here, it added something down in this list, and this is called a parameter. Now, these parameters are really important because if you're familiar with any sort of manually coded data transformations, you'll know that if you change a field name, those data transformations that are leveraging those fields will obviously break. It's going to be looking for a field that no longer exists. However, in Timextender, this is how we're dramatically reducing build and maintenance costs. So these parameters are tracking the object name in my data warehouse. Let me show you how that works. So here we have order quantity multiplied by unit price multiplied by the value. But what if one day I go in and I say, well, this isn't just value. We know that this is value of the euro, right? Let's change that name. Let's apply our naming convention here. But of course, this change might break my scripts downstream. But in Timextender, I change that name, and all of my transformations leveraging that field are automatically updated to maintain that solution, maintain those pipelines. That's how you go from a manually coded, brittle pipeline solution to something that's robust and dramatically less expensive to maintain. Okay, so we've made some transformations here. Let's go in and take a look. As I mentioned, we have this additional ERP system. We have more purchase transactions happening out in Europe. We want to bring those purchase transactions into this table and have those appear in our dashboard. So how are we going to do that? Well, if we look through our ODX, we can see in our catalog here, somebody already added that data source for us. This is that European ERP system. Now, this data source specifically is using the Azure Data Factory engine to ingest that data. We can take a look at that here. And as you can see, this data source, again, this is an Azure Data Factory data source. So this is triggering an Azure and automatically generating an Azure Data Factory pipeline to analyze the data in the source and then move that data, of course, into my Azure Data Lake. Now I want to take that data from my lake and bring it in here so I can continue to do analysis across all of my purchase transactions in my different ERP systems. So let's go ahead and search through this data source. As you can see, it is quite a robust data source. There's a lot going on in there, but I can filter that down. So I'll search for purchase, see what I can find. And here I have a couple of different tables. So this purchase order detail table is exactly what I need. I can simply drag and drop this table. And this time I'm going to drop it right onto my existing purchase transactions table. And I can use a feature called Smart Synchronize. So again, what Timextender is going to do here, instead of creating a new table, it's automatically going to map that into my data warehouse table. Now, when it's doing this, it's taking a look at all of the field names in there, and it's aligning those fields with the fields in the destination. This is all happening automatically for me. So you can see that with an application with this level of intelligence, how quickly you can make changes, how quickly you can develop and maintain your modern data estate. Now, I just did some pretty simple transformations here, but we want to get into something that's just slightly more complex. How about something like a slowly changing dimension? Now, if you're familiar with data warehousing, you might be familiar with a slowly changing dimension. It's a very common task that you need to do. Now, let's take a look at products. In here, I have a standard cost and list price. Well, some of my accountants are telling me, hey, the standard cost and list price is not matching invoices from a month ago. That's because, of course, costs change over time. We know that, but they want to see these changes available in the data source. These aren't tracked in our data source, and we want to see how those changes are happening. We can track that in our data warehouse using a slowly changed dimension. Now, this is typically a task that requires a lot of coding and really, really advanced trained data engineers to be able to accomplish and build this out. In Timextender, we go to table settings, history, enable history, and there we have it. We have our slowly changing dimension. We can go in and define which fields we want to track changes on, in this case, list price and standard cost. Now, if these values change on any of our products in here, we're going to have those new and historical records tracked all in the same table. You can see that the simplicity of this approach, we simply defined those changes in the user interface. Timextender is now going to generate the new code necessary for that slowly changing dimension to be tracked in my target database. And again, all of these transformations, all of these scripts are visible for me. So if I need to go in and make changes, I want to see what that code looks like, I can click on here, customize code. I can go in here and open that up. I can even open this up in my desired coding platform, and I can make the changes that I need. We can see all of the transformations, all of the scripts being applied here. Now, the incredible thing about this is that when I move, say, from an on-prem SQL Server to a cloud-based engine like Azure Synapse, something like that, a change like that is very significant. It requires a lot of scripts to be changed as well. Well, you don't want to have to rebuild your data warehouse. And now with Timextender, you don't have to. Timextender will automatically regenerate all that code for you based on the target platform being selected in here. So I click OK, and Timextender will again regenerate that code for me. So all of my business logic defined in the user interface is abstracted away from that code. That code gets generated, and then that allows me as an organization to scale my analytics solution over time and ensure that the solution I'm building is future-proof. Okay, so we've made some changes here in our data warehouse. We want to bring those out to the users. Let's go ahead and open up my purchasing model here. So this is that semantic model I was talking about earlier. We have here a couple of different tables. We have a date dimension, a product dimension, and then of course our purchase transactions. Now these are being mapped directly from our data warehouse. So you can see products is products. I look in the data movement pane, we see this is the exact table I'm bringing in from over here. Okay, and we have our purchase transactions. We have a new field added and we want to bring that in. Okay, so I have my order amount in euro. Let's go ahead and just drag and drop that over to purchase transactions. I'll click OK. Now, instead of including this simply as a plain old field, I'm going to hide that field and instead add that as a measure. We'll call this order amount, EUR. We can change our aggregation type simply from a drop-down menu. This is going to be a decimal, and our data format we can specify and customize that. We'll use the German euro. Go ahead and click OK. And now we have our measure added with our formatting and customizations all applied. Great. So we've done a lot of work here in the user interface. What we want to do now is generate all of that code, or have Timextender generate that code for us. So let's go ahead and hit deploy and execute. Now, as you know, in a traditional solution, you'd have to define all of these definitions exactly you want being done, and then hand these definitions over to a data engineering team that's going to write all of the code for us. And that might take weeks, if not months. In Timextender, we can simply hit deploy and execute. This will create a new version of our project. I can say here I added exchange rates. This will allow me to roll back at any point in time. Maybe there's a change I didn't like or wasn't happy with. Maybe it had an unintended consequence. Well, tracking down that code can be very difficult to do in a traditional solution. Timextender, we simply roll back to the previous version and recover from our changes very quickly. Timextender is now reviewing the changes that I made. It's generating and deploying that code, writing create table statements, alter table statements, creating the tables that I need to land the data. Now it's moving that data. The data is being moved from those source systems, the exchange rates, my USA ERP system, my European ERP system, landing that in the lake, moving from the lake into a relational database data warehouse, and then of course, bringing those out to my data marts. It's doing all this in 5 simultaneous threads. And if you notice, I brought in new tables to my data warehouse, the latest table, but I never actually specified any dependencies. I didn't tell Timextender when to execute that table. It simply knows because the relationships and the lookups provided in the data warehouse tell Timextender how those dependencies work. So it figures out those dependencies on the fly and generates an execution path that's efficient and taking into account all dependencies for me automatically. Not only this, all of this is monitored and maintained. So you can look back to your historical loads and see when a specific table ran, how long it took to move the data, how long it took to run the data cleansing procedure. What are all these different pieces, how they're working? You can use this data to not only monitor your loads, but look at historical loads and find potentially some ways to improve or reorganize your data warehouse to make it even better. So now that we've reloaded all of our data, let's go ahead and close this. Let's navigate back to our Power BI dashboard. Now in here, we have the dashboard. I want to go ahead and hit refresh and let's see what happens. By refreshing our dashboard, we see we have this new data being loaded in. So we have this data here from Europe. As you can see, the Europe is in the blue color. So all of that data is being brought in from my new system, now available in my dashboard in just a few minutes. And now what we want to do, of course, is bring in that new measure. We don't want to show this just in USD. And we see we have that new calculated measure right here for us. I can simply click that and add that to my visual. So not only did we bring a new data source, ingest that data into the data lake, we also did some currency conversion, some transformation. We're going to have more historical information about our products over time, as well as bringing in data from a brand new ERP system into our dashboard, updated our data warehouse, as well as updated our semantic model, or in this case is analysis services tabular. So we did all of this within just a few minutes. And you can see that with this kind of agility and this kind of speed, you can finally get through your backlog of IT requests or your backlog of business requests. So you can start working on these high impact projects that you've been wanting to work on for a long time. But of course, though we've made some changes and we're very happy with them, now come all the questions. Our CEO comes back and he says, well, I see you have all this data here, but it doesn't seem to match my reports. How come it doesn't match my reports? How did you get to these numbers? Well, we can always trace that back in Timextender. We simply go and click on a measure here, go to visualization and click on data lineage. We have our new measure and we can trace that all the way back to the source system. Here we have our measure, we have our field. This is traced to our field in the data warehouse where we're performing a transformation, multiplying these 3 fields together. And you can see those laid out right here. Of course, these two fields are being mapped from the ERP system in the US and in Europe. Those are outlined there. And this is being coming from a lookup where we use that Euro join there. And that's coming from our open exchange rates data source. But let's say this doesn't seem quite right. Maybe we do want to trace one of these fields back and take a look at that. Well, we can simply double click on any one of these. It'll jump right to that field in our data warehouse. We can begin addressing, troubleshooting these issues very quickly and very easily. Great. So we corrected any numbers that we had on there, but instead of the CEO this time, now we have an auditor coming by. He wants to ensure that we're following all the regulatory compliance reports that they have. Is your data warehouse documented? Who has access to the data? We want to ensure that all that documentation is in place. Well, if we're building this by hand, we'd have to start from scratch, write or update all of that documentation. In Timextender, we can click on documentation, click OK, and have a PDF automatically generated within just a few seconds. Timextender is going to package up all this metadata outlining our entire project, every table, every field, every database, every data lake. And we can see that all in a nice formatted document for us. We can see here the nice table of contents, fully hyperlinked. We can click on those hyperlinks and jump to different pages. This is our purchase transactions table. We see all those fields outlined here, business descriptions, data lineage, any transformations or joins that I've created. We see that join that I added right here. We also see this transformation that we wrote. All of this gets placed into the documentation and is constantly updated. You never have to worry again about having out-of-date documentation. Great. So we have covered a lot of things in Timextender today. We added new data sources. We ingested new data into our data lake. We brought that into our data warehouse, created tables, altered tables, made transformations, added a slowly changing dimension, and then brought that data out to an analysis services tabular model for our users to provide that data mart for our purchasing department. We were able to do this all within just a few minutes. I hope you can see how Timextender can dramatically reduce costs in maintaining your analytics deployment, your data estate, and significantly speed up these project times. Thank you so much for allowing me to show you our platform.
Joseph, that was very impressive. I particularly want to hang on that last view, the documentation view, because I think that really was the creme de la creme of that presentation, because that ultimately is oftentimes the challenge in an organization, is to show your work and to be able to keep your work up to date and fresh. And I just thought that was an amazing feature. So nice job on the presentation. I wanted to go back. We have a few more minutes and a few questions that we wanted to get to. I wanted to go back to that framework where you're seeing prospects and clients currently either using a stack or potentially having moved from a stack to a platform. Where are you finding folks these days as you're bringing on prospects and talking to folks that are considering Timextender? Where do you see them in this framework most often?
Most often, customers are on the stack column. I would say that in the analytics industry today, it's and again comparing that to the web development industry, it seems like for whatever reason the analytics industry is kind of stuck in the past in terms of how we implement these solutions. And so most organizations, and I think a big part of this, it's not their fault, right? It's because these solutions require so much time, so much effort, so many people, people's entire careers are invested in building out these solutions and maintaining these solutions. And because they've invested so much time and money, it's very difficult for people to move away from that. So while the industry has evolved, many of the technologies, the underlying database technologies that have evolved, the way in which we develop these solutions has primarily stayed pretty static over the years.
Well, I want to dig in on that too, because you're hitting all my buttons here. The idea of digital transformation, which is something we cover a lot, and there's a lot of talk about, is certainly a cultural shift organizationally. But I would argue that this is a cultural shift as well, and that what you're really looking to do is I'm guessing, and would love your perspective on this, is really bring in a collection of people in the consideration of a solution like this. I mean, when there is an impetus to consider a solution like this, who are you seeing coming to the table? Where do you find the most amount of momentum where they're not getting hung up on kind of the political friction?
Yeah, great question. Well, honestly, I would say that primarily business leaders, whether that's in the executive team or maybe that is in the management of the BI team, so the BI managers, they're often the ones feeling the pain the most. They're the ones that are having the constant business requests, people knocking at their door saying, hey, I need this data. I need it today. I need it now. Can you get it to me? And they're dealing with their BI teams, the data engineers, and they're like, okay, can we put this together? Can we do this as quickly as possible? And they're really feeling that pain because you have these requests coming in constantly. And they're all, of course, also dealing with all the additional data sources being added almost on a daily basis nowadays. So I would say that a lot of times it is, the upper management, executive team, or the BI managers that are really feeling this pain the most.
Well, and I think that is the extension of a digital transformation, right? It's one thing to say you're going to implement a digital transformation. It's another thing to recognize the implications from a data perspective of that, where you're now bringing in massive amounts of new data and you're going to have to deal with it, or ultimately you're not going to get what you think you were going to get out of it.
Right.
So let me keep going down this path. What should people be thinking about as they prepare to give you a call? What advice would you provide to somebody before they pick up the phone or send in an email request or whatever the contact form is? What would you like them to have thought about?
Yeah, that's a great question, Doug. And I do this a lot. I work with customers like this every day that are interested in doing more with their data. The question that I always ask first and foremost is, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do with your data? What is it that you are attempting to accomplish? Is it a modernization project? Is it preparing data for data and AI, advanced analytics? Is it simply starting on your very first data warehouse? And then what are the outcomes that you want to gain from that project? What kind of outcomes are you looking to accomplish? Because with Timextender, things are done so quickly. It's so important to have the end in mind. I get into many of these projects and start talking about some of these questions, and people say, no, it's okay. We'll get there. We don't need that information yet. We have a lot of ways to go. And it's like, well, no, you don't understand. We'll start on day one and we'll start delivering business requests very, very quickly and very rapidly. So that's one of the things that I always ask is, what are your business outcomes? What are you looking to accomplish?
We only have a few more minutes. Just a couple questions, or actually just one more question. Direct from our audience, what features are coming to Timextender as you look through down to 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, great question. A lot of features are coming down the pipeline. We're constantly implementing new technology. We work very closely with Microsoft's engineering teams to ensure that we're using all of the most modern approaches, the best practices. So we're always adding improvements. One of the things that we're going to be looking at implementing in the next year or so here is the ability to deploy your solution to Snowflake as well. So the idea that you'd be able to build a solution, build a data warehouse, all of your business logic, and be able to deploy that on any desired platform that you need. So you no longer need to be concerned so much about, okay, what platform am I deploying on? Because Timextender will be able to, you'll be able to select that platform and just have Timextender regenerate that code, that business logic for things like Azure SQL Database, Azure Synapse Analytics, and in the future, moving to Snowflake.
Outstanding. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. It sounds like it's going to be a very interesting next few years. Best of luck with all of that. We certainly hope anybody watching this reaches out and engages with Timextender and finds out how it can bring that value that you just saw in that demonstration to your own specific organization. Joseph, thanks very much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug.
Well, there you have it. Another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank Joseph Treadwell and Timextender for their presentation today, and we want to thank all of you for your attention. Until next time, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review. Thanks for watching.